So mobile has been taking over the media and computing world. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've seen the rise of mobile over the past year or two, and to what extent is that really becoming a major focus for Starcom?
Yeah, it's been fascinating. I mean, I've been in this current role specifically focusing on mobility for the past 3 years. I mean, even going back 7 years ago, my account, we launched the first mobile campaign. So really seeing it early on and how it's taken, a big rise. The past year and a half have really been fascinating, hitting on what Ritu said about mobile wasn't part of upfront conversations. It was very rare 3 years ago. My account was the only account that had a mobile video upfront. And so seeing in the past 18 months, other brands within SMG come to the table and wanting to participate in a mobile video upfront, it's a fascinating shift because mobile never had a seat at the table. When I first was in this position, I wasn't even included in upfront conversations. I just basically had dollars, threw them to partners, and that was it. Now, I'm the first seat at the table. And we push our partners from, particularly a mobility perspective, it's mobile first. Even though a lot of the big partners want to understand, why should I prioritize when bulk of the dollars come from TV? And while, yes, that's true, you see a big percentage shift of dollars from TV to mobile, where, the percentage allocation from mobility for, my particular CBG brand started, 0.54% of total dollars invested in the upfront was mobile. Now we're close to 10%, and that's under 3 years.
So 3 years ago it was less than 1%, and now it's up to 10%.
Yes.
And who do you work with? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, you have your TV partners, obviously, because we want the cross-platform execution. So you do have the broadcast partners that we work with. Then you have your Googles, your Yahoos, your AOLs, Microsoft, Brightrolls. So a lot of the desktop partners that now have built out mobile platforms. And then honestly, our biggest spend has been with pure play mobile partners because they offer the most flexibility and efficiency. And obviously they prioritize mobile because that's their bread and butter. So we really work across the board with about 25 partners in our upfront.
Okay, and then when you come up with a mobile campaign, is that part of a unified campaign that takes into account TV and print and everything else? And to what extent are you really focusing and making the mobile part a unique experience?
That's a great question. I think it's across the board, and it varies by brand. When you look at the number of initiatives that we execute each year outside of a video upfront, we have over 140, 150 executions each year. And some, when you look at Olympics, obviously cross-platform, knowing where all the eyeballs are and how do we create that unique experience that really engages the consumer as they're viewing on various devices. But then we also have pure play mobile executions where we're just focusing on whether it's smartphone, tablet, and how we engage the consumer. So it definitely varies by particular brand and really what they're looking to achieve. You also think, we are talking about moving towards this single screen solution and really not focusing on TV, desktop. You also have to think about a lot of these advertisers, they're rooted and built in old systems. So you think of something as simple as dollar authorization, and it's very siloed. And so that does hinder the ability to have fluidity across screen because dollars are authorized in a silo. But we're definitely working to flip that model to make it more of a single approach across all screens.
So let's talk a little bit about ad formats and ad units. And you work with a lot of consumer packaged goods companies as well. Where do these ads appear? Do they appear in mobile apps as an ad unit? Do they appear in, attached to mobile video? So I'm watching mobile video and it's a pre-roll, or is it more, within a certain experience? Maybe I'm in a store and it doesn't even seem like an ad. It seems like an experience.
It's all across the board. Right now, for my particular CBG client, we are the largest mobile video advertiser. So video is a huge focus for us. We also have a lot of rich media, that are built experiences within application, within mobile web. We also have a lot of in-store where you may not know when you think about partners like Shopkick, yeah, it's an advertising solution, but there's ways that we've been able to integrate brand messaging. So it seems very natural. I mean, right now everybody's heard iBeacon, and we're moving beyond just talking about iBeacon and how do we create that in-store experience. So, you talk about a company like PayPal, and you go into a grocery store, and based on what I'm putting in my basket, you can offer up a solution to go visit another product where you're not even realizing it's advertising. You just think it's this application and this particular brand just helping out my shopping experience. So we really do run all sorts of advertising units. I mean, obviously there's a continued big push towards video and rich media, but when you talk about creative issues, that's the #1 issue we face. So a lot is just standard.
Right. So iBeacon, which are these Bluetooth networks within stores and on shelves, that if you have an app that plays along with that, it could push a message to you. This is interesting in the context of video advertising, right? Because I would think that the less intrusive messaging would be a text message or something that's print. So tell me a little bit about that. When is it appropriate to push an actual video to someone inside a store versus pushing some other form of messaging?
Absolutely. The way that we're approaching it now is a user's opting into our message even before they enter a store. So we're kind of dabbling with Passbook, and that's another way that you can activate iBeacon. So through an iAd experience, it's, I create a pass, so I've already shown intent and interest in that brand. So we're using iBeacon as, hey, here's a reminder. And then we can pass that content along, whether it's a how-to video, a coupon. So we're not bombarding the consumer without previous interest. We're focusing on consumers already shown an intent and a favorability towards that brand by downloading the pass. So it's on their phone. They already have said they liked this. We're just triggering a reminder and pushing along an experience once they enter a particular store.
So if you talk about Apple, which at least has a nice unified platform, right? I can have an Apple TV, I've got my iPhone, I've got a tablet. So there's different places where I can have interactions with brands. Are you using that, to, I guess at this point, really to test this kind of unified messaging, where maybe there's some retargeting, maybe there's some other techniques. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the value for me and Apple is data and screens. I know a lot of what they try to sell are these big, beautiful ads. Well, anybody can essentially develop those. The value is, as you said, what's the sequential messaging? How can I follow a consumer knowing that there's iTunes? So you know what I'm listening to, what I'm buying. I'm not lying because I'm actually paying for this. So what am I doing on my phone? How do you create that sequential messaging, deeper levels of engagement across screen? And that's what we're starting to do with a lot of our brands, to understand how do these screens work together, but also how do they work independently? And is this sequential messaging the right way to go? We just want to understand, how do we drive consumers deeper down the purchase funnel? And now that they've extended to Apple TV through iTunes Radio, you have that in-home experience. So you're really hitting that consumer at all touch points. And we're just starting to implement a lot of, I don't even want to say tests, but a lot of executions really to gain a deeper understanding of the consumer across these screens.
So in that instance, you have visibility across their experience in different apps, or do you also can you tie that into what they're doing on the web as well?
It's just within apps for Apple. They're just
apps.
Straight app.
So it's still two different worlds.
Exactly,
right?
It's still two different worlds. I mean, we're slowly inching, but right now they tend to live a little bit in silo. I mean, there are, instances where we're trying to push some partners, but Apple right now, it's just straight application for us.
So when you look at all the different types of campaigns that you've done for your brands and your clients, what are some of the new approaches that seem to be resonating with audiences, and also just in terms of the way you measure, say, engagement or other performance metrics? Or is there anything new that's bubbling up that you're really excited about?
For me, I love the connected home conversation, because you're moving beyond a banner. My fear with mobility is it's going to be seen as a banner and not an experience. And I really like when you start having the connected home conversation and you talk about some of the manufacturers, where let's have a conversation with Samsung. For a CPG client, think of the different, your washer dryer, your refrigerator. How do you create an engaging experience for the consumer through those devices? Where can you incorporate a product life cycle? So if you have, your, let's say, pods, you're almost running out. How do I trigger the consumer via message, you're running out, click to purchase? So those are a lot of the conversations that we're focusing on, is how do we not only get in the home and get in the car, because you don't just want to be there, it's how do we make this meaningful and helpful for the consumer?
Right. So as people digitize their homes, which you're talking about sort of this Internet of Things growing in the home. How do we get consumers to accept that, right? There's a line between something being really useful and magical, like how did you know that I was out of this and that I need it, that's great, to how did you know that I was out of this, right?
Just genius.
And why?
Just genius. I think
right, there's a line.
There's a fine
there,
line.
right?
Absolutely, and where it's going to start is the opt-in. You're going to have that early group, your early adopters, early adopters, who are going to start building the case studies. And we're going to understand what's too much, where do we cross into the bombarding versus being helpful. So I think it just starts with a little subset of the population who wants this. They crave it, and it's going to be your typical early adopters, and they're going to be our focus group to understand how do we deliver messaging? What is helpful to the consumer? And then as you build these case studies, these use cases, then you have more and more of the population that kind of jump on board. Same when a smartphone first came out. You know, people slowly adopt and welcome.
So fine.